Namaskar. Welcome to a brand new episode of the Indian AdGeek. This is episode number 6 and my name is Vishal Mehra. Get ready to meet the man who turns everyday packaging into front page poetry. Rohit Ohri's advertising odyssey kicked off at JWT, where he learned that big ideas often wear simple disguises. From there, he hopped over to Dentsu, immersing himself in Asia's fast-paced markets, before sharpening his strategic wit at FCB, crafting campaigns that could make even the most skeptical consumer do a double take. Today, Rohit will talk about his legendary journey, dive into the art of balancing creativity with commerce, and share tales from boardrooms where brands couldn't get enough of his magic touch. Welcome to the Indian AdGeek, Rohit.
Hey, hi. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely a pleasure to have you. You are, of course, a legend of the industry. Looking back, when did you realize that you and advertising were meant to be?
Quite honestly, the interesting piece there was advertising was something, at that time in my career, I knew very little about, quite honestly. So I was actually doing my cost accountancy, and I'd applied to a very small agency in Kolkata, an agency called Response, right? So and they had put out an ad for a trainee in finance, and I'd actually thought that'd be the right thing to do, so I applied. And interestingly, actually, I was interviewed by um, the head of the agency, and the head of the agency was a gentleman called Ram Ray, who is one of the legends of advertising, right? So Ram used to be the head of JWT in Kolkata, and then he became the head of JWT in San Francisco. And then he came back from there and started his own agency, right? And Response was a really boutique, but very, very highly creative agency. And he was a passionate advertising person. So when he met me, he actually said that, look, I think you'll be much better in account management than in finance, and we'll take you as a management trainee. If you don't like account management, you can always go back to finance if you so think. And the interesting thing is actually was that was something that you know I completely, owe to Mr. Ray, is because he saw in me something that I didn't see in myself, quite honestly. So that was amazing. And, a year later, when I told him that I was leaving to join JWT, he said, that's a very good decision because you need a larger canvas to play on. And I think you'll go very far in advertising. And, for somebody like him to talk about this, a young advertising person who's just about a year's experience in advertising, that was really amazing. And many, many years later, I was actually talking at the Bengal Chamber of Commerce. They had a invitation to, speak. They gave me an invitation to speak at what was a marketing conclave, and Mr. Ray came to hear me. Right, so he said, I wanted to hear what you had to say, and then he just stayed for my piece and he left. Right, and I was really touched by that. I thought it was fantastic. Unfortunately, I didn't get to see him again because he passed away, and but for me, he's always going to be special because in many ways, those initial 12 months of my life, he really inducted me into advertising, what it truly meant to be a great account manager, and what it truly meant to really understand the business of creativity.
What a beautiful full circle moment.
Yeah, that's right.
And did you ever wonder what he would have seen in you to say such prophetic things? Did he notice your people management skills or something related?
No, I don't think you can see people skills there. I think it was basically the way I was talking to him about the business, and he asked me about advertising, and I did tell him what I thought I knew. Incidentally, what I didn't mention was that by then I had actually done a television series, right? So it was a series called Gandevta, which I did it while I was in college. And luckily I was in doing BCom honors, so the college used to get over at 9:30 in the morning, start at 6 and get over by 9:30. So you had the day pretty much free. And I used to actually travel by train to a place called Anandapur, which was outside Kolkata. And there we shot this for over 1.5 years. This was directed by P. Kumar Vasudev, who had made Hum Log, right? So this was his second series after that. And I was playing the lead as the Gandevta. And one of the people with me was Rupa Ganguly, who went on to play Draupadi in Mahabharata, right? So she was my female lead in the series, and it was a very interesting piece because it also, he knew about me, right? So he had already seen me on television, and I was, just remember this was what in the God, seems like so long ago, somewhere in the 80s, and there weren't so many television series at that time, right? So there used to be one every week. So there used to be one on a Thursday, one on a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So Saturday, Sunday there wasn't any series because it used to be Hindi movie, and then there used to be something called Chitrahar, right? So those are the things that actually. So he knew about me. He had seen the series, and he liked it. So I think somewhere he felt that there was a strong creative streak in me, and I could actually be better off in the heart of the creative business
Yeah.
rather than being a support service.
Excellent. How did your experience at JWT and the earlier stint shape your leadership style when you transitioned into agency leadership?
Out of these 22 years, 7 years was in Kolkata, and the balance was in Delhi, right? So the interesting piece was that uh, I really enjoyed the business a lot, and I think the agency also recognized the fact that here's somebody who's really passionate and creative, as well as we worked on many businesses, which so I actually headed non ITC account, right? So principally because I've never smoked, I didn't want to work on any brand that was promoting smoking, especially for kids. So I had asked for a non-ITC account, and then everybody told me, but 90% of our billing is ITC, so you're going to be working on 10%. I said, that's fine. I'll work on 10%. And that 10% over the 7 years that I was there grew to almost about 30-40% of the agency. And we won lots of new businesses. There was mobile telecom was opening up. We won the biggest one. There was the first mobile service in India, Modi Telstra. And so there was a lot of stuff that happened, and it was great. I really enjoyed my stint in Kolkata. And then I wanted to actually move to Mumbai. And I spoke to Mike saying that I'd like to move to Mumbai to handle Unilever. And he said, okay, let me think about it. And then he called me back saying that, no, actually, I want you to do is I want you to go to Delhi to handle Pepsi. Now, handling Pepsi was a very, very, good attraction. But the fact is, I didn't want to come to Delhi, right? So even though I'm a Punjabi, but I speak Bengali and I don't speak a word of Punjabi. So in many ways, all my friends always say that, I'm a Bengali trapped in a poor Punjabi body. So that was that whole thing about, the aggressive North Indian, and perhaps I'd never really fit in and never be comfortable there. But, at that time, my wife said, she said, let's take the plunge. This is a great brand. I think you should just focus on that. And I did that. And perhaps that was the absolute best decision in my life, because those years that I managed Pepsi, I think it was exhilarating, and it kind of shaped me as an advertising professional, shaped my career, and also gave me, the boost that I needed to get known in the industry as well, right? So because Pepsi advertising was the centerpiece of advertising of India, right? So the first campaign that after I took over the brand that we did was Ye Dil Mange More, right? Which was iconic and still is iconic, right? After so many years, right? So, and then we had many other successes like, Mera Number Kab Aayega, Ye Dil Mang, Ye Dar Ke Aage Jeet Hai, and Zor Ka Jhatka Dheere Se Lage. So there were many, many absolutely brilliant, iconic pieces of work that, the team did, obviously led by really great creative people like Anuja, um, who did a lot of the initial work on Pepsi. So that was a really great phase, and I think I really grew in that phase, and so this whole period at JWT, to my mind, was you know uh, formative for me. It really actually shaped my entire persona and what I would be in advertising. So the latter part of my career at JWT, I was the head of Delhi office, which was the largest office of JWT in India and the most profitable office of JWT worldwide, right? So it was a fantastic piece, and for many, at that time, I think what I remember very clearly was this whole, uh, you know, great momentum that we had developed in the agency. When you're looking at a very large agency and a very storied heritage agency, there's always the thought that, what have you as an individual contributed? Because the agency was doing really well. It's a hugely respected agency, and, it was the top agency in India. So, what would an individual actually contribute to it to make it better? Was always very suspect, right? So it was a collection of heritage success. It was about a collective genius of the talent. So there were many other factors, but the fact is that the only place where JWT was actually lacking at that time was in new business, right? So we were very strong in our existing businesses, existing business relationships, but as you had to grow, and obviously, the global company looked at a trajectory of growth. So it was important to get new business, and so we had to kind of, because most of the clients thought that, oh, JWT is so large, right, and perhaps not hungry for our business. Maybe we are not large enough for them. Maybe they'll never look at us. They have Pepsi, and why will they want more? Pieces, and Horlicks and all that, these were heritage businesses. But, and that piece is what I'm really proud of, is really about sharing a vision of, what we wanted to be as an agency, young, hungry again, in a way, and, getting the whole team motivated behind it. And we went on a absolute winning spree where we surprised all clients and they said, "Oh my God, that's JWT. We didn't realize that. Wow." And the aggression, the hunger that we showed in the marketplace was phenomenal. And we won some of the biggest businesses there was, which was the entire Airtel business at that time, the entire Nokia business, the entire, at that time was Walmart, which was Bharti, Walmart business. So these were the biggest pitches in India, and we won all of them. Commonwealth Games, some political campaigns, etc., etc. So it was an absolute stunning thing where I think the team believed that they could not be defeated.
What were the practices at JWT that you instituted to make it such a powerful winning force from being categorized as too large an agency, like you were explaining, and clients saying, JWT is too big for us, right? To being a nimble, hungry, all encompassing, pitch winning agency. What led to that?
No, so what I believe is that if it's a shared vision, it is owned, right? So the important piece is to explain to everybody why we're doing what we're doing, right? So I used to share a lot about how the agency is doing, what are our strengths, weaknesses, where are we in the market, and where do we want to be, right? Once people really understand what is the complete picture, why are they doing what they're doing? Why do they need new business, right? So my whole thing was that we need new business because we want each individual in the company, everyone in Delhi office to grow as well, right? So their careers will grow as we get new business. They get larger portfolios and responsibilities, of course, money, right? So that became a big shared vision and shared goal. And I think once you kind of get everybody excited and on the same page, saying yes, we understand why we're doing this, we want to do this, then actually the interesting thing is we did the first pitch that we mounted in this thing was actually for Bharti Airtel, right? No, actually it was for the Walmart business, right? So which was also Bharti, but this was the Walmart business. And uh, these guys invited only 4 agencies. They invited McCann, they invited Ogilvy, they invited JWT, and they invited Lowe. There were just 4 agencies. They said, any smaller agency won't be able to handle our business because we are going to be so big and we'll require so much of speed. So the interesting thing was we mounted this pitch offsite, right? So we took our entire, I remember this was at the City Club. We took the ballroom and we reconstructed the ballroom into an agency office, right? So at the back, there was a complete studio. And then there was a lounge where the client would sit with all of us. And then on one side, we had made a gallery, right? It was like an art gallery, but it actually had all our work. So you physically walk through the work where people from different groups explain to you what the work is versus just being shown the work on a on slides. And what we told the client, actually, the opening piece was that what I said to them was, we are here today because you wanted a large agency that can deliver to you what you want at great speed with great quality. So let's pretend that we are your agency and give us a brief. So there was a pause and they looked at each other and they said, "What?" I said, "No, give us a brief. We have, imagine you've launched Walmart in India and you have a brief for the agency and you want it really fast and urgent." So they said, "Okay, we need a Diwali promo from things with a discount or whatever." And I said, "Okay, fine." I said, "This presentation will take 60 minutes. At the end of this presentation, you will have the full campaign for you, right?" And while I was saying this, the guys in the studio heard obviously what I was saying, and so we had a core idea. Actually, that was the beauty of it. We had a very strong core idea. And any brief that they would give us, we would put it into that core idea. So it all seems seamless. So when we actually presented the idea to them, they were very happy with the idea. And then at the end of it, at the end of the presentation, the youngest members of our team, they were just fresh copywriters, art directors who just joined, just and they came and they presented and they blew the client away. They got a standing ovation from the client and they said, "This is fantastic. This is the energy. This is the spirit. This is the hunger that we want from our agency." And they said, you demonstrated it. So this then became like a, a legend and a story within JWT, which people used to tell each other. So after the presentation, I invited the whole office to this place to say, come and see what now the new age JWT and the way we present to our clients, right? This is our new philosophy and thinking, is about finding dramatic, creative, interesting ways to present to our clients, which creates so much. Because finally, I believe that pitch day is like theater, right? You have to kind of blow away the client with a performance. Obviously, your work has to be shining, it has to be fantastic, but the way you present it is also really, really important. And I think that then became like a legend and a story. And the power of a story is never to be underestimated, right? So people used to repeat it over and over again to every new person who came in, saying, this is the way we did it, right? And then everyone was excited, saying that we want to do another presentation like that. We'll do it in a different way, but we want to do it. And everyone thought of newer, more creative ways to create impact. And it worked fantastically for us. We did similar things for Nokia. We did similar things for Airtel as well. So it was great, and that created the momentum. It created the belief. It created the whole feel, that swag that you have when you walk into a pitch, saying, we've got this one. Why are you?
What an incredible story, Rohit. Took me back a few years when at DDB we had redesigned our conference room as a retail store for the H&M pitch. They were launching the first ever India focused campaign, and thankfully we won that pitch. I want to go forward a few years to your time at FCB. You made FCB India win Adweek's International Agency of the Year award. What were the 2-3 most critical strategic decisions that drove this transformation? And I say transformation because FCB India wasn't the most exciting place at that time when you took over. Where you left it compared to what you inherited was a day and night difference.
So, the interesting thing is, when I joined FCB, I had already moved with Dentsu to as CEO of Asia Pacific, right? So I had to come back to India for the FCB job. I met Carter Murray in Cannes, and he was a enormous personality, right? So literally and figuratively. So he's a giant of a man, but also a giant of a person, right? So he persuaded me, saying, you have to come back to India. We need you to run FCB for us. And I said, okay, I'll think about it. And then I went back to Singapore, and he actually sent the vice chairman to Singapore to tell me, why haven't you signed as yet? So I said, look, I've just moved and I'm not sure I want to go back to India. So, but he was very, very persuasive. And there was also a personal reason. My dad wasn't too well. So and my brother was in Dubai. So I thought, there's a time my parents need me and maybe I should come back. So I did come back. And the interesting thing is, so Carter came to actually introduce me to the media, and we had a couple of interviews. He had some one-on-ones with some media people. And in one of the one-on-ones, one of the guys actually said what you just said. They said, you got somebody with great credentials. I'm sure he'll do a good job. But, FCB is such a boring, fuddy-duddy agency. you will, I mean, what can one man do? I mean, this is deeply seeped into the culture of the organization, and you can't change that. It's 60 years in the making, right? What will this guy do now? Right. And then Carter came to me and he said, this guy said FCB is a fuddy-duddy agency. He said, I'll come back in 1 year's time. If they still call it a fuddy-duddy, I'm going to jump out from this building. So I said, okay. At least he didn't say I'll throw you off the building, but he said he'd jump off himself. So I said, well, I have to save you. So and then we did a lot of things. The interesting thing actually was, and that I think is perhaps my the the biggest thing that I did at FCB. FCB had a very strong culture, right? Fundamentally, the culture was a very strong partnership culture, right? They believed in strong partnerships with clients. The creative was always an issue, but the clients loved the agency, actually. They loved the agency saying, hey, you guys are great. Wish you did better creative work. That's all, right? So there was a strong sense of that partnership. And I was able to actually take a lot of the existing people within the system. So it wasn't that, I said, okay, now let's get a broom and get everybody out. And I want a new culture. I want to make them like a JWT, or I want to make them like Dentsu or whatever. And I said, no, FCB is unique and has its own very, very strong culture and a very strong way of doing things. What you can do is actually take that and build on it, right? So when you talk about change, it's not always about, hey, I want to change things. I want to build on what you've already done. How can we make that good, great, right? So that's the fundamental piece. And I think a lot of people bought the story. A lot of people who've been in the agency for a long time understood what was required. And with a few new people, I think we managed to, really, really make a big difference, in the perception. And interestingly, um, a year before Carter actually left FCB, he came back to India, met the same journalist, and that journalist actually this time did a three-way conversation with him, me, and Carter, because I didn't know who he was, but Carter called him to the meeting, and this guy actually said, I eat my words, right? This is an incredible turnaround to become, Adweek's International Agency of the Year, to be India's most awarded creative agency across festivals, in many, many agencies. And it wasn't just the awards, right? It was also the fact that we had won pretty big new businesses. We'd also acquired Kinnect, right? Which was a digital agency. And fundamentally, the whole reason why we did that, and mind you, IPG has never acquired anything for a creative agency. I managed to pull off something which, ever since IPG has been in India, it hasn't done, right? It's not known to be an acquisitive network, right? So this was the first time they did this for a creative agency, and my vision was really to look at taking our work, when we say that this is our creative work, really to modernize our offering and say, we need to kind of build this capability into our mainframe in a way. And that's exactly what happened. I think Kinnect is a fantastic agency and is now doing really, really well, right? So they're the largest digital agency in India. And I think I'm really proud of the fact that, this was something that I'd actually managed to do for FCB as part of my legacy for the agency, to leave it in a, much stronger place from a, product. And because awards can come and awards can go, but fundamentally when you look at changing the product from the core, that's when you know that you've created something that will last and stand the agency in good stead as it grows.
With FCB, the motivation to join it probably would have been to turn it around. What was your motivation to join Dentsu? after 21 and a half years at JWT? What led you to that decision?
So, interestingly, I think by then, one of the things that were happening in JWT was obviously a lot of, WPP as a network, I think works very differently from an IPG or a Dentsu, right? Where a WPP over manages and micromanages each of the markets and managers, right? So oftentimes what happens is that, if there's a recession somewhere in the world, or there's some market which hasn't done well, or globally a big business has, gone, a lot of the network actually used to freeze completely, right? So used to freeze headcount, and you had to kind of get rid of people. There was no increment, et cetera, et cetera. And I felt that was really unfair to have such a big impact on the world, uh, not doing it, saying that, okay, these guys are doing well, they should be rewarded, and these guys are, have lost the business, they should be punished, right? So they just did it, and everywhere in the world. So we were actually, I had it really difficult at that time because we were doing so well as an agency, and I had no face to go and tell all our people that, we can't give increments this year because, somewhere in the globe there's been a recession, right? So nobody understood that. Nobody was willing to understand that. And quite honestly, I understood that because I think, we have to reward performance, right? And it has to be discriminatory in a way, right? It cannot be in this, broad sweep. Let's put everything under, and freeze was the favorite word of WPP at that time, right? So everything was frozen. So I was very disillusioned with the agency at that time, and I said, this is not really working for me. And I wanted to try something new. Also, the story of Dentsu was incredibly attractive to me because actually there was nothing in the agency, right? So the first day that I actually joined Dentsu, and remember, I was coming from JWT Delhi, where, our office was over 3 floors. I used to walk through the office. It used to take me 3 hours, right? And here in Dentsu, the first day that I went, I walked through the entire office in 3 minutes, right? So then I came back, I sat in my room, shut the door, and I said, oh shit, I have completely blown my career. Right? This is the worst move ever. I mean, I frankly, was scared because I said, oh God, this is not good at all. And the business was in, I always talk about it, they say business is in red. This was in crimson, right? So it was so bad that, and I remember the first client I met was Mayank Parekh of Maruti Suzuki, which was the largest account. And he looked at me and he said, why did you leave JWT and join Dentsu? Are you crazy? I said, why? He said, Dentsu is my worst agency. I'm going to sack Dentsu at the first opportunity that I get. And I said, oh my God, this was a incredible welcome. So from there, I think, 2 years later, Mayank Parekh told me, you've changed the face of Dentsu completely. And it is such a great agency now. This is the way I want it to be. And we won the entire Maruti Suzuki business, everything, right? So it was then moved to us and another agency. It was Haku Odo. And it was an incredible turnaround piece. Also there, I think the fundamental thing, and I think quite honestly, I talk about this a lot. I learned more in Dentsu than I learned in 21 years, 22 years almost in JWT, right? Because JWT was a system, which was very strong, right? The processes were so strong that you didn't have to go to the depth of everything, right? Here, I had to get into everything, including where will salaries come from, what do we have collections done, because We didn't have money to pay salaries. And at that time, I think, Dentsu in Japan, they supported me completely. And I'm really, really grateful because I had a very good time in Dentsu after that. The most incredible story is actually the acquisition of Taproot, right? Because I spoke to Aggie the day I joined Dentsu, and I told him, I said, look, I feel that we have to have a big story to tell creatively. Otherwise, this agency will not be taken seriously by the industry. And I need, a partnership with Taproot. And Aggie said, no, but we already got another network. We've got their letter of intent. And, I don't think we can go with Dentsu. And besides, it's a Japanese company, he said, and you guys will take forever to get back. I said, okay, just give me a chance. I'm going there. I'll be back in a week and I'll tell you. He said, okay, fine. Let's leave it open. So I went to Japan and I presented the plan for the agency for the next 5 years. And I said, if you really want this to succeed, and the great thing was at that time, Dentsu was really looking at building its international network, and India was a very important player in that, right? So they really wanted to actually change things. And so they said, Rohit-san, what is Taproot? And I said, Taproot is a creative agency, and I think they're the best in India, and we need to do an acquisition. So they said, okay, fine. If you think it's good, then let us go ahead. So I said, but we can't go ahead at a normal speed. They already have an offer from XYZ network. So we need to give them an offer like now. So they said, how much time do we have? I said, 4 days. I said, okay. So they didn't blink an eyelid, right? They called Ernst & Young and they gave them the brief and they said, 4 days, we want you to send a letter of intent to Taproot. And they did. And Aggie was just completely blown away. He said, wow, what did you do? I said, and the beauty of it was, this was my first opening gambit at Dentsu. I was presenting to a board which was entirely Japanese, right? None of them spoke English, remember? And, in the beginning, while I was speaking, they used to start talking as well. So for a second, I was wondering, I said, why are they talking among themselves? Because I'm talking to them. And why are they talking? Then I realized they're talking to the translator who's translating and telling them what I'm saying, right? So from there, you don't even speak the language to actually convince them that there is a acquisition to be made, and then to make it in, get them to move at that lightning speed to get it done. And, they really supported me on this one. They got their best creative guys to come and talk to Aggie and Paddy. And that was a fantastic piece because nobody knew it was going to be Dentsu, right? Nobody knew because everybody thought it was the bigger networks that are going to take them, and newspapers are talking about it. And when the Dentsu news broke, it was a shock. People were like, oh my God. And my favorite thing in this is the beautiful metaphor that always comes to my head is that I don't know if you've ever seen this film Avatar, right? Where after the first betrayal, when the hero comes back, right?
The Navi people.
The Navi. No, but he comes back, right? What is his name? James.
Yeah, something with the J.
Yeah. So he comes back, and he comes back on the really big dragon, right? That red, orange flaming dragon, to kind of show the rest of the Navi people that he is the savior, right? He is the one. So in many ways, for us, that red, orange dragon was Taproot, and the industry was the Navi people. And they said, my God, this changes our perspective completely. And that actually did, because I got messages from every single head of office, head of company, head of network, saying, how did you do this? Right? So that was another amazing piece, which I remember so well, because I think the funniest one was on the final day, I was sitting with my CFO, and we were sitting in the lawyer's office, and we had like lots of papers, like a mountain of papers to sign. And we were sitting there waiting for Aggie and Paddy to come. And there was no sign of them. And I was thinking, oh my God, they've had a change of mind and they're not going to come. And or maybe the other networks given them something last minute, which now we have to match. They're not going to come, and very sweetly, there's an auto stopped outside. I was looking out of the window saying, what happened to these guys? Auto stops, both of them got out from the auto, came into the thing. They said, sorry, I got traffic there. I said, oh God, this is incredible. But that was fantastic, right? So that truly changed the fortunes of Dentsu in India, with Taproot Dentsu being the flagship creative agency, having Aggie access, and from a place where nobody wanted Dentsu to everybody wanting Dentsu, right? It was like light and day. Every single client that I knew said, is there a way that you can get Aggie and Taproot Dentsu into the pitch? And I used to tell them, sorry, we've turned down the biggest clients in India, saying we don't have time, right? So we have all the time, please give us some business to, you have to wait in the queue. We'll get to you. And they were, I could talk to anybody and open any door, whether it was the biggest companies in India, the toughest companies to actually you could make a dream list of brands you want to work with, and I could speak to anybody and get a chance, right? Which was the change of fortune, right? It just completely transformed the way Dentsu was perceived in the market, and that was great. And then later on, we acquired Webchutney as well, which added to a lot of the credibility for Webchutney. And these are the two acquisitions which really shaped the Dentsu brand in India. And both these brands, I think, were enormously successful.
And I'm guessing you carried the learnings of acquiring those two agencies to FCB. Spearheaded the acquisition of Kinnect at FCB.
Yeah.
How do you identify and integrate agencies that complement your core business?
So it was very different for Dentsu and very different in FCB, right? When it was in Dentsu, it was like, we just need the best capability, right? So I went after the best agency, which was Taproot, and we organized around Taproot, right? That's what actually convinced Aggie and Paddy about going with Dentsu, because we said, in any of the other networks, they have many creative agencies, right? So you would be another one of those creative agencies, whereas here, you would be the spearhead, right? So in many ways, they sat on top of the entire network, and then Aggie and Paddy would actually have full say on the entire network's creative, right? So they bought that story. They said that sounds what they want to do, and there was no pressure to just unnecessarily grow. Our focus was on quality, and we wanted the best possible work, which would really solidly build the brand over the years, right? So that was really the fundamental thing we did there. It wasn't really so much about, obviously, Aggie and I worked together. We had a chemistry going and stuff like that. So those are the good parts. But as far as FCB and Kinnect was concerned, actually, that story was very different, because there I was looking at an agency that was culturally compatible to FCB, right? So it wasn't that you just go after the best, because at that time Kinnect wasn't necessarily the best agency. They were a good agency, but not the best. There were a few other agencies that were doing better creative work and winning a lot more.
Chutney being one of them.
Yeah. and Webchutney was actually the big competitor at that time, right? Uh, but you know what I wanted was I wanted a partner that truly respected how the agency actually built brands, right? So in many ways, at that time when Rohan and Chandni were there, and I was speaking to them, for them the interesting part was they said, you worked with clients for 36 years. How do you manage to do that? How do you keep a client interested and engaged for 36 years? We have a turnover of clients so fast, like clients come, clients go, new business, this, that. So it's like a revolving door. And we would love to learn how to keep clients over a period of time. And what is it that FCB is doing so well that is magnetic, right? So that was really interesting. And then this said, we know a few other things which we can teach you, and that'll be it's a marriage of almost equals in a way. There was something they would learn from us, and something they would teach us as well, right? So that was the interesting part of it, because I'd met a number of creative agencies, and some of the other ones went in and said, "Oh well, advertising is dead. In any way, FCB, what's so great about it?" So they had a sense of arrogance of, we know everything and we can teach everything. So I felt that kind of an attitude was fundamentally culturally wrong for FCB, right? So FCB needed somebody who appreciated what was at the core of FCB and then built out of that, which was pretty much what I did as well. So, and I thought Rohan and Chandni were very respectful of that piece that FCB had done, and it's worked really well for them.
Rohit, globally big consultancies are making a serious play for our business, for the ad agency business. You have consultancy companies like Accenture, with its full-fledged agency now, Song. You have McKinsey Digital, you have Deloitte Digital, and so many more, increasingly competing in the marketing space. How should agencies differentiate their value proposition? It gets trickier because if you think about it, most of these guys have consistently higher and more access to the corner office of organizations and brands. I've heard David Droga say creativity needs to be that pillar that agencies need to rally around, but nobody has a monopoly over creativity, right?
So, interestingly, actually, I'd like to start with what you said just now first, is that, and that was the fundamental thing that I always believed in. It is something that we did a lot through every agency that I worked in, is communication with the CEO, right? And the CMO, of course, both of them. But the CEO is and having a relationship with the CEO is critical. So that is something that I believe that all good agencies, all good leaders of good agencies actually have to have a relationship with the CEO of the company, founder, CEO, and of course with the CMO, CFO, etc. That is critical, right? So that said, I think when you look at consultancies and the threat that they pose to agencies, obviously they've come in with a mandate of restructuring an agency or restructuring a company and really looking at processes and how they actually do things, and it's a extension of that, right? So they say, okay, we are recasting your entire company. This is your new structure. These are the ways that you will work going forward. And by the way, this is the creative piece, and we can also do this, and we can. So it funnels out from there, right? So the creativity is also offering, and I think the difference is that in creative agency, creativity is the only offering, right? So that's the fundamental difference, is when you're also creative versus you're only creative, right? So I think the piece of understanding your client and business and consumer and really going to the depth of it and really owning that, right? And I think a lot of agencies have relinquished that by, uh, that high table conversation. It is absolutely imperative. You have to be in the boardroom, you have to be with your CEOs, understanding what those big issues are and coming back with creative solutions for those issues, right? So we've actually painted ourselves into a corner, being only about uh, ads versus about solutions, right? So the moment you focus on solutions and saying we're going to give you solutions of for your problems, right? We'll recast that into the most creative way to look at it, and understanding consumers, understanding the business, also cross pollinating across different um, clients, right? That gives you a huge experience, quite honestly, which is something that consultants struggle with because they don't have a creative mandate from all their clients, right? So they may have a creative mandate from a few, but the fact is that in an agency world, when a creative person is looking at 10 different brands at the same time with 10 different problems, that you're fine tuned to understand, and cross pollinate thoughts and ideas, and that takes you to a space where you truly understand what it is, what are the different cohorts of consumers, how do you talk to them, what will make this consumer tick, because there's an experience you have had on a different category with the same set of consumers. So there's a great cross pollination there. But quite honestly, I don't think consultants are the biggest threat, because I think the advertising agency structure is a big threat to the advertising industry only. So the way I think the traditional networks are running the advertising agency is the biggest threat, because I think they've become so focused on profitability, on shareholder value, that they're strangling the individual agencies, and we're seeing a lot of that, right? So, for instance, we've seen uh, the world's oldest advertising agency disappear, right? So when you kill a brand like J. Walter Thompson, you have to have guts of a particular kind, right? And what is the thinking of the network? That if there is a problem in a network, then let's kill it, right? If that was the case, there were so many of the global brands which have been iconic. Nike has had many issues over the years. They could have, I mean, wrapped up and gone. But the fact is they found a solution, right? The idea is the good manager is to go to the core of the problem and say, okay, this is the problem we need to fix, and fix that problem. I don't think a brand like JWT deserved to die at all, right? And it's really sad that a network thought it was dispensable, and died by 1,000 cuts, right? So from becoming J. Walter Thompson to JWT to Wonderman Thompson, then to VML. I mean, it's like you bled the agency to death, right? Slowly, and it's very sad. And I'm saying that's the fundamental issue, because I think in many ways a lot of the networks are thinking that I have a problem here, I have another problem here. Let me put the two problems together and maybe they'll become a solution. That doesn't work, right? The problems will stay. Now that becomes a bigger problem. It's not a solution, right? So that, I think, this myopic thinking of networks of, let's get the short-term gains, and we'll see in the long term. Let's get this client now. Let's get this business. Let's improve our margin, right? So that whole quest for margin improvement is a really I don't think there are any conversations and I've actually been in meetings where there has been no conversation about creative work, or can we improve the work, what is required, what is the new things happening, how do you bring AI. There is only conversation about, what is the margin, what should we structure, how should we close, what should we shrink. So they are looking at shrinking to greatness. I wrote about this in the brand equity last week, saying that, this is fundamentally, the way networks are running their individual brands, I think perhaps they are the biggest threat to advertising, quite honestly.
I was speaking to Gautam Raghunath on the podcast a few weeks back, and he said something really interesting. He said the next creative renaissance in India will be led by independent agencies and not network agencies. Do you subscribe to that thought as well?
Uh, you know, yes and no. The thing is, obviously, independent agencies have, and independent agencies, if you look at GoFest this year, independent agency shone, right? So they've unseated the storied creative agencies in many ways. But people say, GoFest is GoFest. It's not can, right? So which is fine. I can understand that. But the fact is that yes, the creative agencies are doing great work, right? So, but will they, uh, is the whole um, transition and transformation of the industry uh, going to be in their hands? No, it's not going to be their hands because they handle a very small part of the entire business, right? So it's, you can't let the tail wag the dog, right? The dog has to wag itself, right? So the thing is that the rest of it needs to get its act together, because if they don't get its act together, then uh, it's just going to be a very fragmented, disparate kind of a world where people are saying, I mean, Mark Zuckerberg has gone on record saying that you don't need an agency anymore, right? That is the end of the agency world, right? So you come to me with the problem and I will solve everything for
Yeah, but
everything.
performance advertising is not the solution to everything. I mean, you have to build a brand.
Yeah.
Whatever
So
happens.
it's really about it's not just about targeting, it's really about what you're targeting, what you're hitting the target with, right? So the whole story and piece of that, those are interesting pieces. Quite honestly, I think we are, the next 2 years are going to be really, really important for the advertising industry, because we have a big merger coming up, right? So two of the biggest networks, which is IPG and Omnicom, are going to merge together, right? So this is a mega merger, right? So it's like a, neutron bomb which will explode. So we have to figure out what happens here, because this, if you look at it in India specifically, you have McCann, FCB, and Lowe. These are three of the top five agencies, right? And then you have BBDO, DDB, and TBW, etc., etc. So they've got another piece, obviously not as large as IPG, but you're combining these all together into one network, which is going to be the Omnicom group. It is going to be massive, massive, because there are not going to be many agencies outside this network then, right? So it'll be all combined together in one whole, right? So that's going to be really interesting, because it's not just in India, right? This is everywhere in the world. This is going to happen, right? So this can either change the face of the industry if it's done properly, or it can destroy the industry actually as well. Because I think the early signs that I've seen, with John Wren actually saying, talking about the savings that he would generate, is perhaps the biggest mistake any network leader could do before doing an acquisition. Because the more important thing here is not to talk about how much you save, but how much you will build. What would you create with these two networks coming together? What is the story that you're going to tell the clients? What is the story that you're going to tell employees? What are you going to tell your prospects, right? So what is that story that will be so compelling in today's day and age, where people are talking about advertising industry becoming irrelevant with the coming of AI? How would you actually recast yourself in a way that would embrace AI and really fly to the next level, right? So what is that story? That story is to be told first before you tell people that, hey, you're all going to lose your jobs. But you
Yeah.
know What are you building?
Yeah,
First, tell us that.
I was just thinking about your conversation with Rohan and Chandni and how they wanted your advice to retain clients for longer. And then I was just hooking that up with your comment about how every brand and organization is looking for business impact and results, and not just advertising campaigns. Maybe there is something there that you would have advised them about prolonging and strengthening client relationships. Anyways, let's get on to what you have just started. I'm very keen to know more about it. Originals. You're focusing on organizational culture as a competitive advantage. Tell us more about it, please.
After I finished with the FCB, I was very clear about one thing, right? I knew what I didn't want to do. I didn't want to start an advertising agency, right? Because quite honestly, I felt that um, I've been in the biggest agencies. I've done the top job in two of them, and I really didn't want to kind of go back into the market and, anyways, compete with the same agencies that I've built or helped build over these years, right? So that was one piece, and the other thing is that I wanted to do something which gave me a lot of free time, and I could do it at my own pace. What I wanted to do. So when I looked at what I think I'd love and what I think I'd be really good at, I I figured there was one thing which I spoke about a lot during my tenure as chairman and CEO of Dentsu and FCB, was really about culture and organization culture and understanding what that culture is about. Because fundamentally, if you get your culture story right, you can transform your business. And it's not just a good to do, it is the must do if you really want business results, right? Because what it does is culture makes a coherent, a solid culture actually makes each individual in that organization perform to their best. And if each individual performs to its best, the organization will perform to its best automatically. If everyone is doing their job to their best, the organization is going to be the best at what it does, right? And if the organization is doing well, then everything else comes completely in place and in tandem. So understanding that culture is really, really important. So I'll give you a couple of examples, right? The whole thing of the question that you asked about JWT. Hunger was a culture story, right? So the whole thing of being hungry again was the kind of thing that we wanted to be as an organization, right? We said that it's about not just hunger to get new business. It's really hunger to be more creative, hunger to be really pushing each individual to their maximum, so that each individual achieves their potential, right? So that whole thing then became a cultural piece, right? So, and that helped us win business. And if you articulate that very clearly, people know that this is what the organization expects from us, and then they believe in that, and then they do it, right? So that was really, really important. In the other piece was in FCB, right? Because FCB already had a deeply entrenched culture. How do you change that culture? And my whole plan was, I didn't want to change that culture. I said, I don't want to change the culture. I want to evolve the culture, right? So I evolved the culture from where it was to a new form, saying that we will take the best parts of this and evolve it into the next level. So understanding that as to how to evolve that culture from what it was, so that you took the people who built that culture with you on this new journey, right? So it's not that you dissociated. And that's when I say that there are almost two cultures in every organization. One is on the wall and one is in the hall, right? On the wall you'll see the beautiful shiny poster, and in the hall you'll see the real culture in action, right? So people often say better together, but actually in the hall, they're fighting with each other, right? So they hate each other's guts and they're trying to tear each other down, right? So there's so much of internal competition and strife that the hall and wall don't really match. So it's very important to really understand that culture, really articulate it in a way that people understand it, and then create some rituals around it which people can see. Because culture has to be demonstrated. It's not to be written in a book, because the moment you write it in a book, then it it's not read, right? And it's not assimilated and it's not owned. But if you can demonstrate it, then it becomes something that people really understand, and they see it in action and they copy that, right? So in many ways, it's replicated on its own. So, like, for
And
instance,
is that what you're trying to say with culture print?
that's right. So basically, what I'm saying is that every organization, has a inherent culture to it. If it's been built, even if it's a youngish organization, then we're saying that there is a culture pulse, right, which is the existing pulse of the agency. To understand that, and then to first phase, you need to understand what your culture pulse is, and then articulate what you want it to be, and then create a culture print, which then becomes something that everybody can articulate. And you have to be able to say what you stand for, right? That is really the organization culture. And I was just with this company where I was kind of talking to the senior leaders about culture. And I asked them that, can you articulate what your culture is in one sentence? And everybody said something else. Everybody said something different. And I said, here is your problem. Because you guys yourself, as leaders of the organization, don't know what to say about your culture. Everybody is saying it in different words and saying different things. That is the fundamental problem. The idea is that if you can't put your culture into a one sentence saying, this is the type of organization we are, this is what we believe in, this is how we do things, and then people know that, okay, we buy this. And you must demonstrate the authenticity of that over and over and over again. It's a repetition that actually then builds that culture over a period of time. So you need to create certain rituals, certain things that you do together as a team. And it's not an offsite. It's not to go to Goa and get drunk and party. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about in the workplace, while you're working, when you're seeing the fire, when you're fighting for a new business, when you're, in the trenches. That's the place where culture is built.
I know you mentioned already that you don't want to start another agency, but if you were, what would be your core focus areas, Rohit, if you were starting another agency now?
Well, that's a really hard question, because I really haven't given that a thought. Quite honestly, I was stumped by that question myself when I thought, should I start an agency? But I didn't want to, right? So that never, actually, I never went down that path. But I think, if somebody was to start an agency at this point in time, I think it's perhaps the hardest and the easiest, quite honestly. I was talking to this young entrepreneur who's started a creative agency, and he wanted me to be a mentor. And the interesting thing was, he's just 27 years old, right? So he's and doing really well, right? So he said, but my creative business is not picking up. I'm not being able to get those account managers. I need account manager. I need creative. I need planner. I said, but you're thinking about this in a conventional way. This is the only thing that you can do, right? You know what the structure is in large networks, in existing agencies. You have to challenge it at every point, right? Unless you challenge it at every point, you're not. What is the point of building something that is anywhere in today's context? People are trying to adapt and evolve, right? So you need to build the evolved agency using, AI in a way that is truly creative centric. and what would you do with that? It's not that, a lot of people say, oh, AI is going to do all your grunt work. That's not true. AI can do your absolute top of the line thinking, strategy, and base for creative ideas. So I'm saying that you have to embrace it. There is no point, there is no way in hell anyone can fight it, right? And we are just seeing the tip of the iceberg. What will come will transform our lives completely. And I think it's important to embrace it and really build using that, right? Saying it's not about adding it, but making it the core and building around it. Saying that now this is the new world and I will build around this core.
I did not even realize that we are so much over our scheduled time. I so much appreciate your time, Rohit, and you being so kind with it. Thank you so very much.
Great, yeah. Thanks, Vishal, and all the best for you and for your team at Popcorn. May you shine in the new world.
Ye dil mange more. Never been more apt than now. Truth be told, I had a long list of questions for Rohit. I could only get in a fraction. But one day soon, I'm going to request him to come back for an encore. Next Sunday, it will be the turn of the Indian AdGeek and Behramji Ghariali, a leading aviation analyst and a commentator, will join us to talk India-China Airlines, Thai Airlines, Emirates, Lufthansa and Ethiopian, all with an Indian link. If you've enjoyed this episode, do not forget to hit subscribe, leave us a review and share it with someone who might enjoy it. The Indian AdGeek streams on all major podcast apps. Rohit isn't active on X anymore, but I am at Vishal1 Mehra. Until next time, keep your creative antennas tuned and your AdGeek flag flying high. Stay quirky, stay curious, and keep geeking out.